Did you know that less than 15% of the books published each year by traditional publishers are by people of color? Well, on Girls Talk Books, we uncover the truth about diversity in the publishing industry and celebrate the authors and industry trailblazers who are changing the game, sharing their wisdom, and inspiring the next generation of storytellers. If you are an aspiring author, a publishing professional, or just someone who loves the power of a great story, this is the podcast for you. So grab your notebook, your favorite drink, and get ready to celebrate the power of representation in publishing. This is Girls Talk Books, where your voice matters. Let's go. Today, we talk about the storytelling of history with author Nadia Salomon, the author of A Voice of Hope, the Myrlie Evers-Williams story. Her story is the first ever picture book biography about the remarkable social activist Myrlie Evers-Williams, with beautiful art by London Ladd. The book received the 2025 Children and Youth Literary Award for Nonfiction. Today, we'll talk to Nadia about her journey from journalist to author on Girls Talk Books. Nadia, thank you for joining me on Girls Talk Books today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you. So I definitely want to thank you. We talk about diversity in publishing and diversity in books. And as I started getting into the whole aspect of this podcast, I wanted to reach out to some women who had some amazing stories and unique voices and had a different perspective on how they came into the publishing industry. A lot of people come in, like they say, think it's traditional, where you have to get an agent and a publisher, and all those things. But the way you find your story, to me, is so unique. Everybody has a story, or everybody knows about different things that happen around them. And as storytellers, as authors, we're able to bring those stories to life and bring those to the world. So I really, really love your story. I think I've found you on Storytelling Academy. Is that where I connected with you?
I think so.
Yeah. So
foundations class.
Oh, highlights. Was it a highlights fund?
I have not yet done highlights.
Okay.
Been either through the PB Foundations workshop or the advanced, because that's where I'm faculty and I teach those sessions.
Okay.
12 by 12. Are you part of that?
12 by 12. That could be it. So if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, there are different ways that authors and publishers interact through competitions, do different websites, organizations like SCBWI, the Society of Children Book Writers and Illustrators, 12 by 12, which is a program that helps, writers write their stories. So it's really good to be in a community where you're having different writers and different perspectives and critiques and, agents and all those people involved in helping you create your journey. So maybe that's 12 by 12, I think, is where I learned about you. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, before we get started, we always like to ask people, what did you read as a child and how did it impact your work today?
Yeah. What's really funny is I don't really have a lot of memories of, picture books like we have today that I read. I probably read, whatever my older siblings were reading. And I discovered Beowulf. And Beowulf has always been, my go-to fantastical, epic poem. It's like an Odyssey kind of poem. And it's epic and it's, got all the fantastical elements with like monsters and dragons and kings. Right. And, I know it's very like, it's probably not what people would expect me to say, but that's kind of where, what I was interested in reading or what I did read and I've loved reading. And I just felt like there was something really magical about it. To be on a journey, to be battling demons. And I don't know, I just find that to be fun. And it's the kind of story that I could lose myself in. So Beowulf was always my go-to. I don't know why, but like that's my go-to. And it's as an adult that I discovered picture books when it was time to, when I became a parent and I had to find books that I could share with my child. And I'd have to say the one picture book that really resonated with me was Where Are You From?
Hmm.
By Jamini Syed Mendez. And that is the book that, for the very first time, like when people say I felt seen,
Mm.
that was the book for me. And so from there, I've always, or even before that, I got into picture books just because, when you're raising children, you have like all the different kinds of picture books that you can look at. And so I fell in love with a lot of the social emotional kind of picture books, anything that's cultural, that shares, a diverse perspective or, um, a different culture so that we can
Mhm.
raise children who are informed and um, appreciative of the world around them. And so, yeah, that's how I discovered, picture books.
So what how many children do you have?
I have one.
Okay, and a little girl?
Hmm.
Oh, okay, awesome. So
Not
you're
anymore. I have a teen now.
oh, yeah, that's a whole different demographic right there. Right, right. Been there, done that.
Right.
So, but that's great. And you're right. When I was younger, I read books like Judy Blume and things like that. And when I became a parent, you're right. Then you start looking for books for your kids and books that may identify with who they are and how they feel as a young person and how they identify themselves. And to me it was a challenge to find books not there wasn't a challenge to find books, picture books about Black people. There was a challenge of finding picture books that didn't always include Underground Railroad or barbershops, jump rope. I mean, it was like just a regular story of being a person of color, enjoying life, being with family. There were very few of those stories.
And it's harder if you're an immigrant because, there aren't that many stories about the immigrant experience or perspective. And like you're saying, for African Americans, it's always the trauma and the negatives,
Mhm.
right? And very few stories of joy and just your average kid going out and just doing everyday normal things. It's almost like you're identified strictly by your trauma. And it was really hard, especially when you're raising a hyphenate and you're trying to find stories that resonate. For me culturally, like there are very few Arab books. There are books about the Jewish experience, a lot more than, let's say, the South Asian experience. But um, anytime you're looking at books about immigrants from different walks of life, it's extremely hard to find that very many books that talk about your experience, like as the everyday joy, like we're talking about. So we could totally relate. It's always about the trauma or like the bad things that happened to your people before they emigrated here, rather
Right.
than, hey, I like to cook with my grandma too.
Right.
We do stuff on the farm too. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, we like to go swimming too at the lake and have adventures. It's just, but we're never viewed with that um, lens. It's always through the traumatic or the negative experience or the bad experience. And so I feel it's kind of our responsibility as new authors to kind of change that landscape and change
Exactly.
that mindset so people
Exactly.
can actually see us like, hey, I want to buy a keychain, but look, my name's not on it. And she um, does the Anjali series, and she has one of those stories where Anjali's trying to find a little tag for her bike, but her name's not on it. So it's great to see stories like that where it's saying like, hey, we're here too.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the strange part about it is when you submit a book to an agent or to a publisher and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is such a great story." And or they'll say, "Well, what is the trauma or like what is the conflict this character is trying to overcome?" And it's like, why does it have to be a conflict? I mean, I get that there may be something this character wants to do, but why does it have to be so dramatic that, people won't buy this book unless there's some dramatic thing,
Drama sells. Come on.
right? I
Go
guess.
to movies to watch a movie about nothing.
I guess.
Like some
Excitement.
you can chew on like while you're watching the film. It's like, well, why are we watching this person like navigate the world around them? Like, where's the conflict, right?
Exactly. And I
Where's the change in the person? So I think that's the reason why they ask for conflict. But conflict doesn't necessarily have to be like, throwing your character in the trees and throwing rocks at them like say.
Right,
Sometimes it can
right.
just be like, hey, what do kids do? Because remember, we're writing for children, so like it has to be through a kid relatable lens. So it's like, well, what are kid problems? We're grown
Exactly.
ups now, right? We don't remember a lot. But then, I'm lucky I still have a kid at home, so I can see some of the drama of like, hey, you have dad. Nana's got like the pet, but like, who am I gonna like snuggle up with? I'm like, isn't your lovey enough? Like, no. And it's like, there's the drama.
There you go. There you
You know what I
go.
mean? So it's just
Yeah,
people need a little something so that you can go on a journey with the character and, see the change and have that satisfying ending. Not necessarily like, the happy, what is it, the happily ever after, but sometimes, you have to settle, but, it's still a satisfying ending. But I think that's really what sells books. But what I do not like is when you write your story and you're talking about your experience and they're like, yeah, that's not possible. And you're like, I lived it. How can it not be
exactly.
possible? It is possible. I'm writing about it so that people can know that this happened to me. And so sometimes you have those kinds of challenges. And that's where I push back and I say, well, it's an important story. And if you can't see the value in that, then there's no point in continuing that conversation any further. I feel very strongly in telling the truth, not perpetuating stereotypes, especially negative stereotypes about, whatever your nationality or culture or your identity is, because I think it is our responsibility to inform. It is our responsibility to tell truths in our storytelling. I don't know if you've seen the movie. Is it American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright?
Oh, yes.
So he's
Right.
talking about like, the stereotypes. And the movie is funny in of itself just because he's like, you know, he's educated, he's in academia, and he's like writing very thoughtful stories. But then he goes to this conference and, they're talking up and hyping like all the negative tropes. And he was like, well, I'm going to write one too. So
Right.
he does, and then he realizes, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing all of this? Right? Because people don't change unless you are willing to make that effort to be the one voice to say, no, you could continue that stereotype if you want, but it's wrong. So I think it's our responsibility to turn around and say, no, we're not going to perpetuate that. But it's not to say that it's not someone's experience if it is their experience, but there is no one story.
Exactly. And I think that's important because it's like there are gatekeepers of the stories. And it's like if those gatekeepers don't feel like they can resonate with it or their kids can resonate with it or it makes their kids feel comfortable and fuzzy and, whatever, then they don't want that story. And I think that's what I love about your stories and stories of other authors that I'm bringing on because you are telling those truths in a beautiful way. A beautiful way. Yes. So
Because I think it's important, not just, for others to see, but also for our own children, because they're children. They really don't know their identity until they become more of an adult and until they experience more of the world around them. And so, what we're realizing as a people, as a nation altogether right now, is that we have been lied to our entire lives about um, a lot of the stories that are coming out, about the history. There's a lot of unknown history because it's always written by the people who won and by the people who want to, um, keep us misinformed.
right.
And I
Control
think
the narrative.
we have a responsibility to write stories truthfully, no matter how awful it is,
Mhm.
truthfully, no matter how much it hurts, truthfully, no matter how inhuman these stories may be, because these are experiences that people had. Like, when, for the Myrlie book, A Voice of Hope, the Myrlie Evers-Williams story, a lot of people, I don't think they realized the terror that she lived through daily. And even when I'm reading it sometimes, because I just did RAD, so I had to read it to a bunch of classrooms, and it's very visceral to read that, you know, people spat on her, people threw rocks at her just because of the color of her skin. Her education was limited because of the color of her skin. Gender issues, gender bias, uh, all that she had to deal with. So, yeah, I think it's extremely important that we tell the truth and we don't sugarcoat, because children know when we're sugarcoating. They know, and they
And I
don't
think
want to be lied to.
exactly. And I think that the important thing about her story is that it wasn't just her that it happened to. It just so happens to be that that's a person who stands out in history, and we're able to share that part of the story through her life. And I think that's what people need to realize, that these aren't one-offs. Like, this just happened to this one person. This was happening to hundreds and hundreds of African Americans.
Right. Everyone around her.
Right.
Everyone
So
around
tell
her, in the Black community was experiencing this.
exactly. So let's get a little bit right. Exactly. And I think that's important, because a lot of times people write stories and they use animals to to do conflicts or solve conflicts. Like, oh, the little brown bear didn't feel included in the little, and it's like, come on, let's just be real. These are real people, real stories. And if kids don't right. And if they can't grasp it now and tell the truth when they get older, they're not going to understand, like, why are Black people upset, or why are Black people that way? It's like, it's always been that way, but you were reading stories that had animals solving these conflicts as opposed to real people stories. Exactly, humans. So tell me a little bit about, let's back up a little, because we're talking about the storytelling of history. So tell me a little bit about how your journey began as an author, and work your way up to today.
My authorship journey started ever since I was a kid, actually. It was a dream. It was something that I aspired to. But I never thought about where or when it would happen. But it all came to fruition when I became a mom. And so that's what really set off my authorship journey. And then I joined FCBWI and started participating in some of these online programs like Storyteller Academy, 12 by 12. I'm also part of Kids Comics Unite, because I love graphic novels, comics, and things like that. And so that's also something that I would like to write
Hmm.
in the future down the line, graphic novels. And yeah, like my start into authorship was, it was always in the back of my mind, but it became a reality when I became a parent and I was looking for books for my child. And then
So what was your profession? What was your profession? What were you doing?
that I was a
Mhm.
journalist.
Oh, okay.
I was a
Okay.
TV journalist, TV and print. So I worked at various television stations from KTVF in Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, all the way to Mississippi. I worked at two different stations there, JTV, WXVT, and then a couple of, stations in between that are now defunct. And, ended my television or broadcast career at WSHM in Springfield, Mass. So it brought me back to Massachusetts. And then I freelanced for the Globe, for a few months, and then got out of the news business entirely because I just felt we weren't really doing the work. We weren't really giving opportunities for truth to be told to the people. And I felt when I got into journalism, that was my goal, to be the truth sayer of my community. But when I find myself with stories that, oh, you can't cover that, oh no, we can't do this, or my life is threatened because I'm asking questions, and at that point I'm like, well, then that is not where I need to be. And so I went into biotech, and biotech is, it's, my heart wasn't there. It was just a job. And then it wasn't until I started, okay, well, I'll just start, writing. And so I was writing for fun. And then when I found that I couldn't find stories for kids, for my kid, I was like, oh, well, maybe I could, you know, now put my author hat on and go do that. And so I took a chance and I did. And I went to a conference called Spring Spirit
Mm.
through SCBWI, but I happened to be in the wrong region. And the woman who helped me there, her name is Bitsy Kemper. She always says, no, stop, stop. But I have to give her kudos, because when I went to Spring Spirit, she took me under her wings. She led me around the conference,
Mm.
and she told me point blank, she's like, I can't do the work for you. No one can. And she's like, if this is what you really want, you have to put in the writing time. You have to put in, the time revising, sending your story out, and trying to get an agent, and then trying to get into publishing. The road's not going to be easy, but she's like, I guarantee you. She's like, in my experience, most people have achieved success, or um, become a published author within 3 to 5 years.
Mm.
And she goes, if you're hungry for it, I give you 3. Well, that was 2015. And in 2018, sure enough, I landed my agent. And unlike other traditionally published authors, I didn't really query my agent.
Mm.
I was on Twitter pitching. So it was through Twitter pitching that I landed my agent. And it was so funny because when I did query, I got so many rejections to the point where I was like, I just want to give up.
Right. Right.
And everyone's like, but you're so close, you're so close. And I'm like, okay, fine, fine, fine. I'll still, stick it out and still send my materials out. But it wasn't until I Twitter pitched. Like I literally, did PitMad.
Yeah, that's right.
I
Mhm.
went through PitMad, and I did, like, uh, the pitch was for a book that, like, we still haven't sold. The book is out on submission, and it was recently sent back to me for, a revision, like an R&R, as they say, like revise and resubmit.
Right.
And so I remember I put the tweet out, with the format that you're supposed to. And I was like, whatever. Like, I don't even think like anything's going to happen, but we'll see. And I swear to you, I'm a big fan of Star Wars. And I wore my Star Wars t-shirt. Okay, maybe I'm superstitious, I don't know. I wore my Star Wars t-shirt, and then there's someone who, like, his handle was something related to Star Wars,
Mm.
and he, like, wished me luck. And I swear to you, like, that first pitch, within 7 minutes, my agent favorited that pitch.
Wow.
And then I submitted, the manuscript to her, and then she was like, hey, do you have more materials? And I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, right, like this person's going to, like, offer me representation. Sure
Right.
enough, she
Wow.
offers me representation. But I think I
Wow.
was so dejected, I was like, yeah, whatever. And all my pitching partners were like, she's like the real deal. They're like, what are
Right.
you doing? Say yes.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
And so I feel very fortunate, and it was very exciting. And, she's a fantastic agent, and I'm very lucky to have her. She supports my work. She believes in, the stories that I want to tell, sometimes more than I do, where I'm like, yeah, right, like nobody's going to want to buy that. She's like, believe you me, they will. And she's like, if I have to shove it down somebody's throat, we will sell
Okay.
it.
Awesome. That's good. You need that. You need agents like that.
You
That's
need an
awesome.
agent who really sees you, sees the
Ex-
value in the work that you're putting out, the stories that you're trying to tell, and just believes in you. Like, there's no greater feeling than having someone that you trust and who also supports you. And besides, we're married, right? Because when you
Right.
have an agent, every book that you create together, that's your book baby.
Right.
they're just as vested in your book than just you as the author who's writing the text. And then, you have your illustrator who's also a partner in the relationship. So, yeah, you want to make sure you have an agent who truly supports you, sees you, and will get your work out there.
Tell me a little, because you're talking about, coming over here. Tell me a little bit about your background and, your ethnicity and how you guys got here and all that. Because I'm interested to know now that we've done this whole interview to kind of go backwards about you.
Right. Well, my parents emigrated to this country from Haiti. So both my parents are multiracial. So we have a very um, multi ethnic identity. So it's very long and complicated. So I usually just, reduce it down to I'm Haitian Lebanese and I leave it at that. But, we have Taino roots, we have French roots, um, Lebanese Jewish roots. So I kind of fall into pretty much most um, cultural identities that I can relate to, and it's something that I'm embracing more as I get older. But um, yeah, my parents emigrated here in 1968, and they landed in Boston, and so I was born and raised in Boston.
Mm.
And we grew up in Boston being in the gray. We didn't quite fit in with everyone because we weren't necessarily African American. We weren't from like, all these other groups. And so we just kind of were just us. And yeah. And then after I was born, I realized as I was growing up that I wanted to be a journalist. I had a lot of dreams. I met our meteorologist from Channel 5, WCVB. Um, Dick Albert, I think is his name. Yeah. And he came to our school. I was in parochial school at the time. And he came to our school and he was talking about the weather and everything. And I remember saying to him, I want to be like you, but not telling the weather. I want to do what the other people that you work with
Right.
do. I want to do what they're doing. And he
Wow.
was like, oh, they're reporters, they're journalists. And I was like, yeah, I want to be one of those.
Wow.
And I remember I went home and I was like, I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to be an author and I'm going to be a singer. And I was like, okay, all of it
Right.
happened in my life, not in the exact order that I told my mom, but well,
Wow.
technically, yes, in the order I did tell my mom. So, yeah, I was a journalist. And then when I gave that up, I was on the music scene in Boston for quite some time.
Wow. So what is your style? What is your music
I
genre?
used to sing, I guess, pop R&B,
Okay.
if you want to call it that.
You had an album out? Were you with the group? Like what
Yes,
was
I do have an album. It has 21 songs on it. It's called
What?
Just Red Skies. Yeah.
okay. Were you a solo artist or were you part of a
No,
group?
solo artist.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I used to perform with a couple of guitarists, at different points. I even auditioned for X Factor thinking that, like, oh, maybe someday. But
Wow.
yeah, it wasn't in the cards for me. And then I became a mom, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this, like,
Mhm.
singing business. I need, like, a real job.
Right, right. It's like playtime's over, right?
Playtime's over. And, I was married. Maybe if I were single and, um, I didn't have a child, I didn't have a spouse, that I probably would maybe still keep going for music. But then I feel when my first book came out, like that is really where I'm supposed to be. And so I am here doing that as an author, writing books, telling stories that I think the world needs to hear. So,
And you're behind a beautiful background of one of the images in your book. Tell us a little bit about the
yes.
background. What is going on in this
Okay, so
picture?
this image is one of the spreads that this is London's favorite spread. And
Mm.
this spread is of Myrlie and her grandmother. They're down by the river, and you can see the Vicksburg Bridge behind me, like with the sun setting. And he says that he loves this image because this is an image that he had imagined in his head that, when Myrlie would go on walks with her um, maternal grandmother, that they would be by the river and just, talking about life. And, you could hear the wind through the reeds. And he was just like this felt like a very significant moment between Myrlie and her grandmother, and he was like, I don't know, this is what I imagined with, like, the ships going under the bridge and smoke and the sun setting. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so
Beautiful.
he had one of the spreads without the text, and so I found that when I was playing around with the text, I'm sorry, not the text, but with the images, this one looked the best. Um, to use as a background for the book, because all the other ones they're beautiful, but they're a little either too busy,
Mhm.
or I would be covering Myrlie's face, and I didn't want to do that. Whereas this is just perfect because there's like that spot there for me to sit.
Love it. Beautiful. So tell us about how people can learn more about you and how to get in touch with you for books, book signings or classroom visits. Where would they go and find you?
I definitely am open to, classroom visits, school visits, because I think this is a great book for the school market. Other places, they can find me on my website, nadiasalomon.com. They can find me on socials. Lately, I've been hanging mostly on IG, so I'm on IG a lot. I am debating whether or not to stay on socials because I just feel like there's just too much noise. But I do have a newsletter. I am currently on hiatus with the newsletter because I've been promoting the Myrlie book, but that is another place. I'm on Substack, so it's Substack with my name, Nadia Salomon. So you'll find me there. I would prefer that people reach out to me through my Substack,
Okay.
because I think that's where I'd rather communicate with people going forward or moving forward, because I feel the relationship there is more real than
Genuine. Hmm.
on the other social media platforms. And other events I have, I am currently teaching as faculty with Storyteller Academy. So if people want to learn how to write or get feedback, that is a great place to be. And I am also going to be part of an upcoming event for uh, it's a marketing boot camp webinar or a session that they're going to be having with the SCBWI Austin region. And I am going to be talking about how to launch your book, the difference between virtual and in real life, because my experience is my first book came out during a pandemic.
Hmm.
And so I could say that I'm more of a master at doing virtual book launches than
Promotions.
I am
Okay.
in real life, because in real life I was terrified.
Oh boy. Okay. Right. Right.
I felt like I really had a good handle on doing it virtually versus in real life. And I think for my third book, I may go back to, like, I think I'm going to do it virtually. Real life was kind of scary, but it was fun,
Oh,
but it was just
yeah.
like very different. And so I'm going to talk about that in my marketing class or the webinar with the SCBWI Texas region. And that is on March 1st.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yay. Well, a lot of cool.
happening.
Yes, a lot of cool things happening. So I appreciate you taking your time out. And this has been great. But talking about, the storytelling of history and why it's important, I thought you were just the perfect person to launch that topic off. So thank you for taking the time out with me today. And we will definitely be on the lookout for your next projects and just keeping following you. So thanks again.
Sonya, it was great being here with you. Thank you.
Wow, that was a great interview with Nadia Salomon. To learn more, visit her website at nadiasalomon.com. This episode was hosted by me, Sonya Hollins, and produced by M2 McMillan Media. Are you an author with an amazing story to share? Or do you work in the publishing industry with insight that can inspire others? Well, we want you on Girls Talk Books, where voices matter. Or are you an aspiring author with a story to tell? Well, we can help with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more.